Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Anna Venturini. I'm the Policy Director at European Biogas Association, and it is my great pleasure to open today's webinar to launch the 15th edition of the EBA Statistical Report. First of all, thank you for joining us. We are expecting more than 900 participants today, an impressive number that speaks to the growing relevance of biogases in Europe and its energy transition. As every year, this publication is the result of an incredible collective effort here at EBA and of our technical department in particular. But this publication would have not been possible without our members, who once again provided invaluable data, insights, and sectoral knowledge. The 2025 Statistical Report offers a comprehensive picture of the state of biogases in Europe. Among the highlights, you will find an overview of biogases within the EU energy landscape,
A detailed
analysis
of
of the biogases market, key trends in end uses, updated data on digestate production and its use, focus on biogenic CO2, insights in investments, the socioeconomic impact of our sector, and of course, as every year, the report features country-by-country analysis, providing a clear view of national developments and contributions in 28 different countries. As a reminder, the report is free for all EBA members, while external participants can purchase it easily through the QR code displayed on this slide that you see now. And new this year, you can also request a printed version if you prefer a physical copy. Before getting started, let me walk you through today's agenda. So we will have a keynote speech, and after this, we will move to key outcomes presented by our technical department. And after this presentation, we will have a Q&A session where we encourage you to share your questions via the Q&A box and upvote your favorite question. And I will already anticipate the most frequently asked question. So yes, the webinar is being recorded, and yes, you will receive both the recording and the slides after the event itself. So, so our keynote is now being kept busy. So I will pass directly the floor to our technical director, Anastasia Agapova, to bring us through the key outcomes of this report. Anastasia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Welcome, everyone. And I'll walk you through the basic outcomes of the statistical report exercise that we're doing every year. So let's first, before we dive into the direct statistics, talk about the EU energy landscape. So currently, over 90% of natural gas demand is covered by imports into European Union. It highlights European Union vulnerability regardless energy security. On the positive side, EU is making progress in terms of renewable energy. Now it accounts for 48% of what EU is producing. And we have been seeing that the production of renewables and biofuels have been increasing year to year. And it's a long-term uptrend. However, still to this point, it's only 12% of what EU consumes as of 2023. But these, again, the consumption has also been increasing. It has been 4% 30 years ago. Now it's 12%. We see that the natural gas consumption has been stable over the past decade at around 20%. But there are, of course, forces that trying to reduce the overall gas demand. Even though we expect the gas demand to go down, the natural gas still will remain a significant part of EU energy mix in foreseeable future. And this is where renewable gases, particularly biogases, become essential. They offer a fossil-free alternative that can directly replace natural gas in existing infrastructure and without any need for costly retrofits. And beyond energy, biogases also play a crucial role in European circular economy, converting organic waste into valuable energy source and nutrients. So now let's go into what has been produced in Europe in terms of biogas and biomethane. So 22 billion cubic meters has been produced as of 2024. On the graph on the right, you see these two colors. The lighter green is the biogas production. It's expressed by methane units, so we can add up the numbers. And the teal green is by methane. So what we have been seeing is that the biogas production has been rising quite a lot since 2011, but it has leveled off in the past 5 years. We still see a lot of course, biogas is the main energy being produced in the sector, and we still see a lot of interest. It's very necessary for the local economies, but the production has leveled off. What we have been seeing, though, is that biomethane has been growing steadily and at a much higher rate than the biogas. And we'll talk about biomethane in a few moments, but just kind of to highlight that the statistics we collect is for most European countries. So we consider all EU 27 countries and additional countries outside of EU 27, which are United Kingdom, Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, and Ukraine. So we collect multiple data sources. As of now, this 22 BCM is the whole European production, and 19 BCM out of this is EU 27 specifically. So this represents 6% of EU natural gas consumption 2024, so which is maybe not such a high number, but it's still not insignificant. And this 22 BCM being produced is produced by over 21,000 plants across all Europe. And this amount of gas is equivalent to gas consumption in Belgium, Denmark, and Ireland combined, which is actually, again, quite significant. So despite the strong strategic relevance of biogases and biomethane for European Union decarbonization, we do see, again, this leveling off and temporary slowdown of the sector. And this moderation, we think, is primarily contributed to uncertainty in the legal and regulatory environment across member states. Here I'm talking specifically EU27, and in particular, lack of higher legislative certainty combined with complex permitting procedures and the phasing out of a lot of support mechanism that we have been seeing as well. So which has constrained the project development and delayed investment decisions, but we're expecting things to pick up again. We don't believe it's a permanent sort of shutdown. So a bit more in detail about biomethane. So there are 25 countries in Europe that produce biomethane. And the total biomethane production is 5.2 BCM across Europe, and 4.3 is specifically in the EU27 countries. Again, we see pretty high rise, and overall, the growth of biomethane sector has been at between 10 and 18% year to year. This past year, it has been about 9% growth. Again, a bit of a slowdown, but still a strong swing upwards as well. There is a difference between how much is produced and what is possible to produce. So here you see 7 BCM a year, which is installed capacity in Europe. This data comes from our yearly exercise on biomethane map that we do. So we have a separate interactive map of all biomethane plants across Europe, and also for members, we have the analysis report that accompanies that. So this is as current as the first quarter of 2025 data. So it is possible to produce 7 BCM. So currently these plants, they work at slightly less than 80% capacity. The leading countries in terms of biomethane are, of course, France and Italy, not only in general in production, but in the scale up. They had incredible growth in the last several years, over 300% growth. And then we have Germany, Denmark, and UK, which may not have had a significant growth recently, but they're in the top producers and they contribute significantly to this sustainable potential. We have, as I mentioned, counted 25 countries that produce in Europe. This is as of 2024. As of 2025, another country joined this biomethane producing countries, which is Poland. But since we talk about 2024 statistics, is not counted yet, will be counted for the next year edition. Then let's talk a bit more about biomethane. At the moment, there are 1,620 biomethane plants across Europe, and 1,433 of these plants are in the EU27. This is, in fact, the biomethane map what you see in the bottom, but the numbers are specifically 2024. So on the map on the left, you see the number of plants per country, and here France is taking the lead at 760 plants. It is quite significantly more than any other countries, but the number of plants does not actually translate to the total amount of gas being produced. So we have to keep this in mind because France actually has one of the smallest average size plants across Europe. So here, Germany has 260, and being 3 times less amount of plants, it produces almost the same amount of biomethane as France. Italy now is the third place. Again, it became very fast runner-up due to the changes in their, again, support schemes. However, for example, Denmark having 58 plants, again, is in the top 4 producers. So number of plants, again, does not necessarily translate to the amount being produced. On the map on the right, you see the average plant size per country. And as I was mentioning, France has 251 cubic meter per hour as an average plant size, and Germany and Italy are significantly larger, and Denmark is one of the top biggest plant size countries at 1,468. At only having 58 plants, they're able to compete, well, maybe not compete, to contribute a lot to the total production. So the average plant size across Europe is 483 cubic meter per hour. If we talk about the U27, this average plant size is actually not much different, is around 470. So that's kind of both Europe and EU. The more data about biomethane. What we want to know also is how these plants are connected to the grid. We see the map here on the left, which shows in different colors whether the plant is connected to the grid or not connected, or we have not been able to collect the data. As you can see, majority of them are connected to the grid. So 86% of European biomethane plants connected to the grid as of first quarter of 2025. We do see in blue the not connected plants, and this on purpose. So they have a bit of a different model. They produce LNG, and these are mostly countries like Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, that they don't have a well-developed gas grid, so it's difficult for them to connect. So they do different model. This is again across Europe. The ones we currently have as majority of unknown is United Kingdom, because this year we're not being able to update the data, which we hope to do next year. If we remove the non-EU countries from this data set, the grid connection actually rises to like 93%. So almost all of them are connected to the grid. And most of the plants that do upgrading to biomethane use membrane separation technology. It's over 50%. There is always a quite consistent share of the market of other upgrading technologies like water scrubbing, chemical absorption, and pressure swing absorption, but they kind of stay within the same range year to year. So the membrane separation has been leading technology for already quite a few years. Then the last point I would like to make about this general statistics is the feedstock being used. We see a strong transition towards the sustainable feedstocks. So again, because we keep track of how many new plants use what feedstocks, and we see almost no new plants that start operating that use energy crops, for example. So it's more and more of residues and more of, for example, organic municipal waste. On this slide, you see these two pie charts. On the left is the feedstocks for biogas production, and on the right for biomethane production. They do look different. However, you have to keep in mind that the feedstock they have availability to is the same. In fact, you don't need different feedstock for biomethane production. What it shows that the plants that upgrade to biomethane somehow have better probably access, or they operate on a bit of a different model. So they have a bit of a different share. But this is a new development this year because the previous years we've been seeing these pie charts, they were completely identical. So for biogas, we have 69% of agricultural residues being used, which are different things, sequential crops, energy crops, manure is pretty big share, and other things, and just like small percentages of other ones like the industrial waste and so on. For biomethane pie chart, here we see that agricultural residues are 45%, and 22% is organic municipal solid waste, and 19% is industrial food and drink waste. So these are the main takeaways for the production of the biogases and biomethane. And I would like to pass the floor to the other member of technical team, George Osei-Wusu, who is technical and project officer.
Right. Thank you, Anastasia, for setting the ground rolling on the major statistics for the production. We'll now take a look at an overview of the end uses for biomethane within the same period. This comes from the chapter 4 of the statistical report, where you'll find further details on the various sectors and how biomethane is playing a versatile role, across all of them. I'll begin by mentioning here then now that biomethane, when we look at the end use split, it's very country specific, and more often than not, it's driven by various factors within the country, like market incentives, support schemes, available infrastructure, and then generally targets that has been set by these countries, which I'll show in a bit as we have it. But then let's take our attention to the pie chart that we already have in the slide. And so on the right side, we can see the overall split for biomethane, not just on a country level, but then EU-wide, where we see that the share of biomethane is among the four main sites, so the transport, industry, building, and power. And our data from last year actually, compared to this year, showed some percentage increment in the various sectors, such as transport, which still has the lion's share, having 25% compared to 23% from last year. And this correlates actually with the rising demand and the number of bio-LNG facilities that are coming online, which are also mainly going into transport as well, and also the demand coming from maritime. And so we'll see even more of that in the slides that are coming up. But then this is followed by the heating and building industry or sector, which has 18%, because then again, spatial heating already takes a big part of Europe's household energy consumption. And then the heating industry is also providing better alternatives for from conventional natural gas systems. And so we have that also coming in from the heating and building sector. And then we have power with 15%. And then industrial applications having 14%. Now, the chart below that is what shows the breakdown at the country level. And this is where we see the market-driven incentives and targets come to play, with countries like Italy and Finland using their biomethane in transport, already taking into account, for example, in Italy, that they have one of the largest fleets for gas vehicles. And the use of biomethane in transports is also supported by mandates and quotas for consumption for biofuels in transport. And there are also capital grants available for biomethane liquefaction facilities. Bio-LNG facilities and bio-LNG filling stations are also supported by these capital grants. And so you can already see the demand going there. And then we see Switzerland and Germany largely using biomethane in heating and electricity production, because then Germany, for example, in particular, they provide a strong example for how biogas plants, are adapted to support their grid stability, because through flexibilization, the operators can install excess electrical capacity, which allows them to increase output when the demand or prices are high, and or scale back when the demand is low. And so this strategy is then also reinforced by feed-in tariffs and other support schemes that have traditionally, incentivized the operators to maximize production during peak hours. And then when it comes to the industry, we see Belgium and then Sweden as some key examples. And as we are still on the subject on the industrial applications, I'll then share some also then the what we see with biomethane when it comes to the industry, because then again, biomethane is transforming the Europeans' energy intensive industries by integrating directly into the process that traditionally rely on fossil fuels For example, in steel making, biomethane is beginning to enter direct reduction workflows and reheating furnaces. So instead of just redesigning these furnaces, the operators can now use biomethane to supply the methane that they need to either directly react with the methane-based routes or reformed on-site to produce hydrogen for reduction in the steelmaking process. So the plants get to keep the same process architecture, but then they substitute the carbon origin, which in turn reduces their emission. We've seen this being done in Sweden and in other places. But the chemical and plastic industries also are using biomethane in two practical ways, basically. First, even as a low carbon fuel process, and also as a feedstock. So then the biomethane can be converted via electrical steamed methane reforming and syngas routes to produce chemical products like methanol, which enables, downstream chemical production, and then while switching from carbon feedstocks to biogenic origins. And we see pilot plants, there are scale projects all across Europe that are developing these methanol syngas pathways to feed existing chemical value chains. And just to mention, even one of EBA's projects is on the same topic where we are looking at the production of methanol with the integration of biogas into the whole production system. And so there are a number of examples also in there. The glass and ceramic pharmaceutical industries, they also benefit from biomethane in a very nice way, because then it serves as a controllable high temperature fuel, for melting, for firing, for sterilization. And because this process demands, steady heat, biomethane can produce or can supply this, either via pipelines or to be liquefied for sites that are off-grid. And this provides a viable option for operators to maintain the thermal profiles, exactly as before, whilst then lowering their emissions. And then also finally, when we turn our attention to like fertilizer production, even as an example, ammonia and urea, they rely on hydrogen and CO2 basically, and then biomethane can be reformed to produce hydrogen and the biogenic CO2 that is needed. We are going to hear more of biogenic CO2 in the coming presentations. My colleague Pablo will shed more light on this. And so this offers practical pathways to decarbonize existing ammonia plants without redesigning the whole synthesis loop. So then, having said that, we'll now take a look even into the transport sector, because then again, the out of the 28 biomethane producing countries that we have, 16 of them produces bio-LNG. We've already seen transport being part of the biggest end use sector. And so you can already see that this is a trend that is not so surprising, because when you look at out of the last year we had 14 countries producing bio-LNG, now we have 16 with Latvia and then Ukraine coming in. And also when you take retrospectively the forecast for biomethane production, so when you look at the figures that we had from 2022, looking at the production forecast for 2024, the bio-LNG sector was supposed to have about 12 terawatts from 98 plants. And now we have 15 terawatts actually from 101 by active plants all across Europe. And so this provides us, also the confidence, in the continuous growth and the demand that we see towards 2028 with an additional 13 terawatts in bio-LNG production volumes coming online. And also, when you look at the number of plants from 2023 to 2024, we've seen an additional growth of 43 plants, even for the bio-LNG industry. And majority of this, about 80% of the bio-LNG produced is being used or is planned to be used in the road transport. And then we see that even here in the next slide, where we can see the share for biomethane, even in the transport sector. Indeed, 78% already goes to heavy duty. But then again, the maritime sector is picking up. The maritime sector is picking up because then the share of biomethane has maintained 17% from last year and even to this year. And then we can still see that the demand is increasing for various reasons. Then the first indication is from the order of LNG fueled vessels that we've seen increase from 1,006 in 2023, rising to 1,300 in 2025. So this already provides a good signal, because then again, biomethane is providing a seamless integration into existing LNG-powered vessels. And so that provides that easy transition. And also from our investment data over time, we've seen that the investment going into maritime-related infrastructure, so new orders for the LNG vessels and the biomethane demand in itself are also increasing on that side. And then the last point even here is on the emission reductions. Now, given the policies, in place, just to mention, like, for example, the Fuel EU Maritime, biomethane presents a better alternative, when it comes to the GHG reduction, when you consider it on the well-to-wake assessment. And so these policies and then these advantages puts biomethane in that position that contributes to the transport decarbonization in general. So I'm going to pause here and then hand over to my colleague, Gabriela Papa, Technical and Project Advisor, to give us more insight on the nutrient cycle with digestates. And then if we have any questions, we'll discuss them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, George, for presenting perspectives for end uses of biogases. Here you may know what this chapter is about. It was also included in our previous 2 years ago edition, and we decided to add it again. So we are talking about this clearly valuable stream product that is obtained alongside the biogas production. And this year we restructure and update figures and discuss on digestate production in Europe and its application across different fields and innovative valorization options, with also some few case studies. Here in 5 minutes only I provide very few highlights on its usage in agriculture sector, which is actually the most common end use. It is really indeed necessary to consider local waste materials with fertilizing potential that are capable of supplying key nutrients for strong crop yields. And by using these alternative resources, we can reduce really our dependence on fossil fertilizers and ensure health soil in the long term, and also circular economy objectives. We know that in 2024, EU imported more than 20 million tons of synthetic fertilizers, which include NPK, nitrogen and phosphate and potassium, and about 10 million tons of synthetic nitrogen-based fertilizers are applied in total on our European lands. And by replacing fossil-based fertilizers with digestate-based one, we can prevent 2 BCM natural gas for being used, and results this in reduction of about 10 million tons CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions associated with such displacement of synthetic fertilizers. So now I show you key figures on how much and where digestate have been produced from our sector. So we found that in 2024, about 25 million tons digestate were produced in Europe. Over 50% comes from agricultural feedstocks, mainly manure. Organic municipal waste and industrial food waste makes up about another 30%, and sewage sludge, you can see, represents about 9-10%. Over 30% of total digestate produced is from Germany, and the digestate also from UK, France, and Italy represents about 15% each. And of course, you can find in the report very much, of course, details and numbers with tons per year, per different feedstocks, per different countries. So the digestate, we can say that can deliver really big impact both in terms of environmental improvement in the long term, but also in terms of energy security in EU. Then, having said that, obviously all this comes with an efficient digestate management, and the best practice indeed are really essential, really crucial for maximizing all the benefits, because yes, it's all about having good practices. And in the chapter, we indeed include an extensive consideration and extensively touch upon all appropriate approach currently gaining traction across Europe to reduce risk associated and risk derived if digestate is not properly utilized. You see the importance, for instance, monitoring the initial input of biomass feedstock is essential, together with the very important timely assessment of nitrogen budget and nitrogen use efficiency. So we need to tailor the dosage of nutrients to plant requirement, of course, and soil characteristics also must be adjusted. And all these are extensively discussed in the report. Then finally, we have estimations on the synthetic fertilizer replacement potential. If we take in account the European nitrogen demand, this could cover 17% of fossil synthetic nitrogen-based fertilizers and 25% of phosphorus and 7% potassium demand. And of course, this would increase as the biogas and biomethane production increases by 2040. We can see these numbers going up. So the digestate would be even more an abundant alternative to synthetic fertilizers, enabling a substantial reduction of 7 BCM fossil natural gas consumption and able to displace over 5 million tons nitrogen, 1 million tons of phosphorus, and 600K tons potassium fertilizers. So you can find details and discussion of these figures in our report, and thank you very much for your attention. And I pass the microphone to my colleague, Pablo Molina.
Thank you, Gabriela, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I will now walk you through the main stats of those biomethane facilities which are currently capturing biogenic CO2. As a reminder, biogenic CO2 is obtained on the upgrading of biogas to biomethane, where the two gas streams are separated, and this biogenic CO2 can be further treated, liquefied, and captured. It's also worth noting that biogenic CO2 from biomethane will play a crucial role in achieving the emissions targets reductions that were set by the climate law targets, and that the capture of biogenic CO2 from biomethane not only offers a sustainable, renewable, scalable, and cost-effective solution and a replacement for the fossil CO2, but it also strengthens the competitiveness of our industry, as this biogenic CO2 is a green commodity that, given this biogenic value, can provide grain feedstock to different applications and end uses, or it can also be stored and on the ground, providing even permanent removals on negative emissions. Looking to the stats now, we can see that in 2024, 70 biomethane plants capture biogenic CO2, a total of 0.61 megatons per year. Then we know that in 2025, already 125 biomethane plants are already capturing it, and a total of 1.17 megatons per year. To put this number into context, this corresponds approximately 60% of the current CO2 demand on the conventional markets of solid and liquid CO2. And this will continue to increase in 2026 if we compare it to the capture of 2024. We know that 8 additional biomethane plants will be capturing the biogenic CO2 and adding an extra 1 megaton per year of captured bio-CO2. This will continue to grow by 2027, where we will reach more than megatons of biogenic CO2 capture and around 178 plants. Also, where is this biogenic CO2 that has been captured going today? We know that 75% of the captured bio-CO2 is directed towards CCU, and the remaining 25% we are unsure about its destination. And under this 75%, we know that more than half of it goes to conventional markets, such as 32% on the greenhouses and 21% on the food and beverages, another 10% to e-fuels, and the remaining percentage in other applications that could be dry ice, medical applications, metal welding, among others. Regarding the distribution, per country by 2027, a question that a lot of people ask is whether are we going to go, or the industry is going to go towards bio-CCU or bio-CCS. There is not a perfect answer to this, as this will depend on the local conditions of each country. Here on the graph on the right side, we can see the top capturers of biogenic CO2 in 2027, starting with the United Kingdom, which most of it will go to CCU. And the reason the UK will remain the leading capturer for biogas is due to the instability of the local CO2 conventional markets that have provided project developers an stability in terms of prices. When we look at Denmark, that jumps into the second place. There's certain drivers coming for it, and we see as well that the CCS will add a considerable capacity in the country. The reason for this is bio-CCS tender that was released last year, especially targeting bio-CCS and on making it a tender on an open base, also for fossil sources, where 3 biomethane plants were awarded contracts on this tender. That's why it adds 160,000 tons of captured CO2 from 2026. On the other drivers for the developments in Denmark is the e-fuels that are driving considerable demand, and also it's important to notice that in Denmark we have larger scale projects that require CO2 consumption. This is also followed by Italy on the third place, as we can see on the graph on the side. This can also, one of the drivers could be the biomethane decree of 2022 that had specifically a capex support also for the liquefaction and the capture of the biogenic CO2. Then we have the Netherlands with the SDE plus system, also France with the incentives that have been in place. We also can see on the graph that France has the highest number of plants capturing the biogenic CO2, but as my colleague Anastasia has previously mentioned, the size of the plants in France tend to be smaller, and that's the reason we see as well a smaller capture capacity. And the distribution beyond 2027 will depend on a wide variety of factors, including how will the infrastructure develop, how will e-fuels come into play, whether the permanent removals will also be integrated into the ETS system, how will the biogenic certification schemes come to operate, and also support schemes specifically related to each member state. And of course, we also have to consider the geographical match between demand and supply that can arise in the different CO2 markets. We have already talked about biogases production of today. It's also important to analyze what are the biogases growth prospects in the upcoming decades. We can start this analysis by examining the biomethane investments that have already been earmarked to be invested in biomethane by 2030. We have collected data directly from project developers and project operators, and we know that 28 billion euros have already been secured for these biomethane investments. This translates into 7.3 BCM per year of added biomethane capacity in Europe, and this is an increase of 1 BCM compared to the data that we collected from the past year. This is also translated to 900 biomethane plants are planned to enter into operation in the upcoming 5 years. And regarding the countries where these investments are being planned, we can see that Spain, Denmark, and the UK are the top leading countries with 4.8, 3.1, and 2.4 billion respectively. This is followed by France, Italy with 1.5, 1.7, and 1.3. And it is not a coincidence that we see that Spain is leading the secure investments. We know that Spain has the 4th biggest potential in Europe when it comes in terms of biomethane production. We will have some slides on this in the upcoming presentation. And this has awakened the interest of investors from all over the world because of the great potential in terms of specifically also on the agricultural residues. When we look at the graph on the right side, we can see all the countries follow after Italy, such as Sweden, Poland, Finland, Greece, where investments have been secure, and other investment destinations that we can note are European, yet to be specified where specifically it will go to, with 6.8 billion, and European with 1.02 billion. Looking beyond 2030, we have to note that there will still be a continued need for gas in the coming decades, as Anastasia was explaining at the beginning of the presentation. Here on the graph on the right side, we've got the numbers from the impact assessment that was done by the Commission for setting the climate target, the climate law targets. And on the light blue, we can see the natural gas consumption, which will go from 2023 of 330 BCM, is expected to go down all the way to 95 BCMs by 2050. If we compare it to the biogas and biomethane sustainable production potential in Europe, we know that based on the Guidehouse reports that this will go in 2030 from 40 all the way to 150 BCM. And what we can see is that the projected natural gas consumption and the projected biogas production potential are expected to converge at a certain point between 2040 and 2050. And this gives us a clear indication of the key role that biomethane will play in the upcoming decades, not only to decarbonize our continent, but also to break the dependency from fossil fuels. Because not only biomethane will be able to replace or to take all this natural gas consumption, but it will also be able to replace these fossil sources with a sustainable, renewable, locally produced biomethane. Furthermore, we have to also note that the research and innovation will unlock further potential for biogases via some other technologies such as e-methane, gasification, and other innovative developments that can be the production of biomass from marginal and contaminated lands, or can also be the improvement of pretreatment technologies, or also as well the treatment of novel valorization sources. I will now give the floor to my colleague Soritsa Ubiparip, who
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. What I will do is present a brief country analysis that you can find in detail in the paper version or online version of our statistical report. So in this year's statistical report, we provide the detailed country profiles for 28 countries, covering among other topics, production figures, market development trends, and policy frameworks. What I will do is give a short overview of the expected 2030 trends at the EU level, and then zoom into two countries, as I mentioned, to give you a concrete flavor of what the full country analysis looks like in the report. So for this webinar, we selected France and Spain, as together they illustrate two different growth dynamics. France as a major biomarket for biomethane with strong yearly additions and a very large project pipeline, and Spain as an emerging high potential market where rapid expansion is now starting to materialize. This combination will give you a good sense of how diverse and how fast the biomethane sector is evolving across Europe. So in this slide, I will firstly zoom in on what the updated national energy and climate plans actually mean for biomethane. So today, 26 EU countries have either a biomethane target, a biogas target, or a broader renewable gas target in their NECP plans. Taken together, these commitments add up to around 26 billion cubic meters of biomethane and biogas by 2030. And on the map on the right side of the slide, you can see how this looks like per country. So in some cases, the target is clearly biomethane. In others, it's a biogas or combined renewable gas target. But overall, the message is that biomethane is now embedded in national energy and climate planning across almost all European member states. When it comes to, when it comes to country analysis, as I mentioned, we will zoom in on France and Spain. France is currently one of the front runners in biomethane market development. The country has around 1.6 billion cubic meters per year of installed biomethane capacity spread over 1,830 biogas and biomethane facilities that together produce 21.8 terawatt hours per year. So a key feature of the French model is that 100% of the biomethane is injected into the gas grid, so it directly substitutes fossil fuels. And the growth pipeline is also impressive. There is 627 new projects at different stages of development, which could add another 29.2 terawatt hour per year of combined production once they are all online. On the graph on the right, you can see the growth in biogas and in particular biomethane in the past several years that is quite significant for this country. What is also important to mention for France is that from next year onwards, natural gas suppliers will be required to include a certain percentage of biomethane in the gas supplied to office and residential buildings. So this obligation will take the form of biogas production certificates and is expected to support the development of larger scale plants, about 25 gigawatt hour per year, thereby driving further growth in the French biogas and biomethane market. So when it comes to Spain, this is slightly a different story. Spanish biogas and biomethane market is still considered as an emerging market, but with huge technical potential. So the country currently has more than 100 terawatt hour per year of biomethane potential, which is the fourth highest in Europe. And it is already a top country for planned investments with about 4.8 billion expected by 2030. On the ground, we see a rapid expansion of biomethane plants from 5 plants in 2022 to 14 in 2024, and around 75 gigawatt hour of biomethane production growth in just a short period of time. So Spain is moving from potential on paper to concrete projects in the pipeline, and investment signals are clearly there. As we have seen, substantial investments have already been committed and production is expected to continue rising in the coming years. However, clear political commitment and robust regulatory frameworks will also be essential to stimulate the market growth and unlock the significant potential of agricultural residues available in this country. Now, beyond concrete numbers, volumes, and national energy climate plan targets, biogases also deliver a lot of value outside the energy balance. So the next slides will look at how biogas and biomethane reduce emissions and what they mean for jobs and local economies in Europe. So this slide summarizes how biogases contribute to greenhouse gas reduction along the whole value chain expressed per megawatt hour of biomethane. So first, by avoiding methane emissions from manure, we save around 349 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per megawatt hour of manure derived from biomethane. And this is often the single biggest climate benefit. Secondly, we can replace synthetic fertilizers with digestate and avoid about 199 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per megawatt hour, and at the same time support soil organic carbon and carbon farming practices. And finally, when biomethane is used together with biogenic CO2 capture and permanent storage, we see an additional 120 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per megawatt hour that can be removed. When biomethane replaces fossil fuels directly, there is a reduction of around 462 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per megawatt hour. So overall, we can clearly state that biogases are not just neutral, but in the right configuration, they can be strongly climate positive solutions. On this slide, there is a representation of socioeconomic footprint of biogases that is equally important. So along the value chain, biogas plants provide organic waste processing, improve soil health, supply biogenic CO2, and support greenhouse gas reduction, rural development, and circular economy. They also anchor a solid EU value chain from technology providers and service companies to farmers and local operators, which underpins energy security, clean tech leadership, and sustainable growth. When we talk about numbers, so in employment terms, we estimate more than 250 jobs created by the existence of the sector in 2023 that can potentially rise to 500,000 jobs by 2030 and up to 1.8 million jobs by 2050, so within the next 25 years, if Europe taps into the available biomethane potential. What is very important to mention when talking about employability and jobs is that jobs created by the sector are local. They're not easily relocatable jobs. They're often in rural areas where employment opportunities are scarce. And these are all the reasons why actually biogas and biomethane sector is also a tool for territorial cohesion within Europe and on a local level. Thank you very much. That will be all from me.
Thank you very much to the technical team for this overview on the analysis made in the statistical report. We have a strategic role for biogases to play in the future. It is seen by the statistics that were presented. The share of gas imports continues to grow. There's a need also for dispatchable energy in the European Union. And we saw the final figures that were presented by the technical team, 22 BCM in Europe, a modest growth compared to last year. And from this growth, 5.2 BCM are concentrated on the biomethane segment and also on EU countries. We also saw during the presentation the importance that biogases have to decarbonize all end uses, including industry, including transport with bioenergy. We saw some new figures on the production of other co-products beyond energy, so digestate and bio-CO2. And we also saw some other countries that are at the moment growing or leading the sector. We have many others included in the report. I would like now to give the floor to the participants to ask some questions. They're having already some questions answered in written in the Q&A. I would like to start now with the first question. The shares of biomass feedstocks, is this considering mass, volume, or energy basis? So maybe Anastasia, I think, would be the most suitable one to answer. But
yes, the answer is that we consider mass by mass wet weight. However, we do have what's not shown in the slide. We do consider the energy content of the feedstocks that we also analyze, but this is not shown on the slides. But this specific graph is wet weight of the feedstock.
Okay, thank you very much, Anastasia. I hope this answered the question. Then we have another question related to end uses. So there's a no share of end uses in the split for biomethane. Are the statistics based on certificates or on actual use of biomethane? Maybe George?
Yeah, so we do have this because then again, the data that we have regarding end users also comes as part of the whole data collection from our members and then the national associations. And so we try to see on the country level what the end users are, and we are trying to map out this part so that we have a lesser share on the unknown. But this is an ongoing work. And so next year, we are actually putting measures in place to make sure that the unknown part is done. But we actually look at what is actually being used and based on the data that comes from our members and the national associations.
Thank you, George, for the answer. Another question for you, maybe not switch off the camera yet.
All right, okay.
This one is also on bio-LNG statistics, if they refer to physical liquefaction or mass balance liquefaction.
Okay. So most of the plants that we mapped out for our bio-LNG is mostly physical connections to the plants. So then we are looking at this. But then we do have some examples like in Germany where proof of sustainability is also being used in the accounting for bio-LNG. We saw that this year in our data collection. But largely it's physical connections to the plants. So actual physical connections.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
then maybe a question on the state part. So what are the assumptions to calculate the displacement of synthetic fertilizers?
So we do consider the nutrient balance, so it's not a weight replacement, so to speak. I actually don't want to go into too much detail about assumptions. If you read chapter 6, it's there in a lot of details, but just for you to know that it's based on the nutrients that can be replaced.
Thank you, Anastasia. Another question this time on bio-CO2. So the data on bio-CO2 captured is specific to biomethane production. Maybe Pablo?
Sorry, Angela, could you repeat the question?
Yes, so the data on bio-CO2 captured, is it specific to biomethane production? So are we considering biogas, biomethane only?
This is only for biomethane production, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. And then how much investment, I guess this is for George, on new plants is dedicated from the outlook that was presented, and how much is dedicated to upgrading plants? Do we have this information?
Yeah, so from the investment outlook that we published earlier this year in summer, we saw that for greenfields or the new biomethane plants, we have about 24.2 billion euros going to new installations, and then around 700 million going for brownfields. That is the upgrading of an already existing installation. So that's how the investment goes. And so you can find more details on the report on our website.
Thank you. And maybe last question before we go to our keynote speaker that unfortunately was a bit late this morning, but is here with us actually in the office. So last question, do you have a split between unsubsidized and subsidized biomethane production in Europe?
Yes, at the moment we do not have the specific data on how much biomethane is subsidized or unsubsidized, but this is a work that it will be taken forward, specifically with the report that we have on support schemes.
Thank you, Pablo. So, well, as you see, this document is, let's say, a living report that is updated every year. Every year we try to improve the accuracy of the data that is presented thanks to the contribution of our national associations. I will leave the Q&A here. Of course, many of the questions have been answered in written. For the others, sorry, we didn't have enough time, but I would like to now give the floor to our keynote speaker, Daniel Mess, member of the European Commission's Future Competitiveness Task Force. So please, Daniel, the floor is yours. And sorry that we had these hiccups this morning with the delayed keynote, but well, as I said, Daniel is here with us in the office. We are very happy to welcome him today, and sorry also for the technical problems at the beginning. But well, as you know, we are live, and this happens. This can happen all the time. So please, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and Also, indeed, apologies for being a slightly late arrival in your own office here. Glad to be visiting, but for me, it was actually a big benefit to have this reversal of the order book, because then I could listen to this very interesting and very rich presentation, because I cannot express enough how valuable this type of exercise is for people who are working on the policies and the political targets and the political dialogue. The facts and figures, the numbers behind the story are so essential. So I was actually very happy to be able to listen to all these speakers, and to really compliment them for this hugely important work to inform our policies. So now I'm a member indeed of the Competitiveness Task Force in the European Commission. That is a task force that von der Leyen herself established because of the importance of the Draghi agenda, to make sure that the recipe book that he had, also in the area of clean energy, is followed through by all departments in the Commission. So we sit in the Secretary General, which is the Ministry of General Affairs, and directly report to the president and the cabinet as SecGen. So that shows the central value of this the work of the task force, and our ambition is indeed to have each year like concrete areas, economic areas that matter a lot for the competitiveness of the continent, and to really drive that forward in an accelerated way to with investments and reforms and the right regulatory framework. And there, biomethane really fits in. The report gives really a lot of like facts and figures, but for us, our task in the European Commission is actually to walk the talk. We have this 35 BCM by 2030 biomethane target already since the Repower EU days. And that means that we should not just have that target on paper. We need to work with the industry, with the users, with the other stakeholders to actually make that work. We should walk the talk and then really bring that forward. And this is also a big topic that is interesting for us as a competitiveness task force. I used to work, for some people who know me, in the cabinets of the climate commissioners, Frans Timmermans and Wopke Hoekstra. But also in my new job in competitiveness, this matters a lot. It's I'm saying the obvious, that if you look at the competitiveness of the European economy and the industries that we have, the fact that we need to diversify our energy sources to deal with energy price hikes, that's the make or break point for the competitiveness of our industry. And in order to overcome that challenge, you must have as many resources, energy sources as possible, and they need to be obviously also the clean sources, but they need to, you need the maximum flexibility in there. Biomethane is important, and that political target of 35 BCM by 2030 is so important. Now, I like biomethane not only as a topic, but also as a product a lot. It's a safe choice. It's a smart choice, and what I also really like about it, it's a community choice. Now, it's a safe choice. I've visited a few of these biomethane plants during my work, and can confirm that they are safe, that they don't smell, and that they are really solid. And that's an important thing, that a part of the story that we need to say together. It's indeed a smart choice, because you can inject it into the existing gas infrastructure if you have the connections to that infrastructure. And as I said, what I like about it is a community choice. I've visited also a greenhouse in the Netherlands that was really looking into the possibility to use the biogenic CO2 as a CO2 replacement, and they would then directly buy that in a way from their own neighbor. So it's your own community bringing your own energy independence, and I quite like it, quite like that too, as a policymaker on biomethane, and the general story that your waste can fuel the future in transport is nice. Now, I won't keep it like very long, because but I would like to stress that in order, if you want to do this then right, and have all the right measures and the right environment to bring in investment, the partnership is key, and that partnership should not be a hollow word. If you want to bring an area like this forward, You need to do it together with industry, together with stakeholders, together with member states, indeed, and in a coordinated way with the European Commission. It stands or falls with that partnership. So that's why also in the competitiveness task force of the Commission, we're such a huge fan of this tripartite model that Commissioner Jurgensen and his DG are pushing, and there is a dedicated tripartite for biomethane in the works, and we really wholeheartedly support that kind of effort, also from the task force. And I deal with it, and it is already like focusing on some of the topics that were already mentioned in this again very rich report. It is indeed looking into issues like permitting and the regulatory framework, the regulatory clarity for investment. Now, as such, the Renewable Energy Directive, which sets the renewable energy targets, is up to date in terms of like taking account of all the possible uses of biomethane in the different sectors for all these targets, like in transport and in industry. But of course, it doesn't stop there. I think it is good news that each member state now has in their national energy and climate plan a plan for a biomethane plan. But a plan must also, of course, then be implemented. And permitting is really also on the radar screen of the task force in general. There are recommendations from the European Commission how you can speed up permitting, but of course, then we would like the member states to actually follow that recommendation. And actually, that tripartite on biomethane, that partnership with member states, where you talk about how to mobilize investment, how to help them also with mobilizing investment in the right framework, you can then talk about could we then walk the talk on permitting too, and could you then accept that you actually follow the recommendations that our colleagues in the energy department did, because quick permitting is obviously key. So these are the type of things that we're also looking at with a lot of interest. I already mentioned indeed the legal clarity and the framework. I know that the building is, I don't know, optimistically halfway there. If you are an optimist, I for instance also think it's very important to think about indeed the certification of biogenic CO2, so that you can valorize and get some money from the side use of the biogenic CO2 in other industries. The second thing that I think is also important, also from our perspective in the task force, is the business case. How to really make that business case for biomethane as attractive as possible. I'm, for instance, also in the task force working on a future big competitiveness project on chemicals industry. So to see how we can modernize some of the big chemical plants in Europe so that we can keep them in Europe. And I'm very much aware that we then also need to see a bit like where the link is with biomethane, as was already mentioned by George. I think that's good to look at, and I think that's also the thing that this type of way, this way of working could offer, that you link different things up to make that business case. And indeed, the planning of the infrastructure is on our radar screen, also in the context of that tripartite that the energy department is working on. You see, indeed, the French success of being able to inject, I thought it was even 100%, right? Like into the grid. And that is, of course, key if you want to get to these milestones in 2040, 2050. So the planning of the infrastructure is indeed also important for us to have a razor sharp idea. Is that up to par, and what do we need to do to make it better? For me, that's also like on when it comes to dealing with energy price hikes via storage solutions. Another big project that we're doing in the task force is on solutions to energy price hikes in southeastern Europe. That is dealing with a lot of a severe handicap in energy prices. Then we're looking into, can storage solutions, a faster deployment of energy storage, can that help to, well, avoid some of these price hikes, because you buy it at the right price and then you take it and you use it when the price is more attractive. And then we tend to immediately think about like things like batteries and geothermal energy if you're lucky. But I would also like to include in that story, like, but what about the potential of biomethane and the existing gas infrastructure? Are we then taking account of like where that can go and where that can be in our planning? So the infrastructure question to me is like pretty broad. So now I spoke far longer than I also anticipated. It is also because the report was so good. So thanks a lot again. And I really think that the doors, our doors, my door, everybody's door in the Commission should be open for you to talk about these lessons. As said, we need to build this story together, really based on the assumption that biomethane isn't just like a nice environmental green story. It is a hardcore competitiveness story that we need to have flexible energy sources for our key economic sectors, and it's a hardcore security issue because indeed, if in your own community you can produce the clean energy, what a good world would you then live in compared to the one that we're living in now. So this is a story that is also hardcore competitiveness and security, and I personally am also vested in working with you on making that a good story as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for this closing that was supposed to be an opening of the webinar, but thank you very much. Anyways, please don't go yet because we are going to hand over also our key to support us in this process of unlocking biogases. And thank you also for giving already some hints on what probably not everybody knows, that there are these conversations related to the biogas tripartite agreement with the European Commission. And with this, I think it's a nice link to the closing of the webinar from Anna Venturini, our policy director. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Angela. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude today's presentation of the statistical report, one message stands out with absolute clarity. The biogas and biomethane sector is ready to deliver, ready to contribute decisively to Europe's climate neutrality, ready to strengthen our competitiveness, and ready to help Europe navigate an energy trilemma that is increasingly defined by security and affordability concerns. We are witnessing a moment where energy security and EU businesses' competitiveness are central drivers of industrial and policy energy decisions. More and more sectors, from transport to hard-to-abate industries, are turning to biomethane as a concrete, ready, available, and cost-effective solution. And this is not theoretical. This is backed by real commitments. We heard today the industry has already allocated 28 billion euros to new biomethane production, reflecting both confidence in this technology and the urgency of scaling it. Yet, despite remarkable momentum and years of steady growth, the report also delivers a warning. Instead of accelerating, production is now slowing. Not because the potential is diminishing or lack of willingness to invest, but because regulatory bottlenecks, administrative burdens, and legislative uncertainties continue to stand in the way, as well as the lack of functioning internal biomethane market. As with all renewable, this is a marathon, but too often the sector finds itself running an uphill steep chase, with new barriers appearing just as old ones are being overcome. If Europe wants biogases to play the role that the competitiveness compass, the Clean Industrial Deal, and the EU climate law all envisage, we must act now. So the sector is asking what any competitive industry needs: legislative stability, the lifting of unnecessary barriers and red tape, and recognition, political recognition at European, national, and local level. In this context, we see real promise in the upcoming biogas tripartite agreements. This can provide the coordinated, collaborative, and consultative framework between European Commission, member states, and sectoral stakeholders needed to accelerate deployment and ensure that policies are aligned across institutions and member states. This is exactly the type of collaboration our strategic and fast-growing sectors deserves. Because ultimately, biogases and their co-products have already proven themselves as essential components of the EU path to 2030 and 40 climate and energy targets, and essential to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. They strengthen our competitiveness, enhance our energy security, and accelerate our climate transition. The sector is willing and ready to deliver. And as we look across Europe, we have every reason to be optimistic. The progress in a number of member states, such as Italy, Denmark, France, the Netherlands, shows that it is possible when clear policies are met with strong ambitions. This frontrunner demonstrates the enormous potential that can be unlocked across all Europe. Now it is the moment to build on these achievements, to bridge borders, to finally activate Europe's own substantial and sustainable source of renewable gas. By doing so, we are not only strengthen our energy security, but empower European industry, rural communities, and consumers alike. If we create the right conditions, Europe can turn today's challenges into long-term competitive advantage. The momentum is real, the technology is mature, and the opportunities are right in front of us. Together, we can scale a homegrown solution that delivers for our climate, our economy, and our citizens. The future of renewable gases is not just necessary, it is profoundly promising. Now it's time to close this webinar, and we really hope this event was informative for all participants. Please remember that the report is free for all EBA members, while non-members can still purchase it. And this year, you can also request a printed version if you prefer a physical copy. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we hope to see you back here next year. Have a nice day.